Thank you. Thank you. It is a pleasure to be in front of so many people. I believe that it is the first time that we've been in a conference, a virtual conference with more. Oh,
Some of our story. Uh, Annette and I both grew up in the United States, um, but the truth is, we never would have gotten to be in front of and with you today if it hadn't have been for so many people that mentored us. My mother and father were both involved in youth ministry since I was a little kid. They actually met when my mom was leading youth ministry. And then I had Sunday school teachers, school teachers, people who invested in me. Some of them just because they took the responsibility for a group of children or youth. Some of them specifically asked me to spend time with them towards growing in my relationship with Jesus Christ, to be able to think more like Jesus and live more like Jesus. Um, some people, after I got out of university, invited me to participate in some youth ministry like Youth for Christ or JNI. And they were mentoring me specifically so that I could be more effective in discipling young people. But all this together led us to where we are now, which was we spent 10 years in Toluca, Mexico, where we worked with a mission organization there.
It was not quite as cold in Toluca as at the seminary in Mexico. The seminary in Mexico may be the coldest place we've ever been, yes, but it was kind of cold too.
Antarctica has nothing on the seminary in Mexico. And then after in Mexico, we started the website paralidres.org, which is a youth ministry and a young adult and children's website where youth leaders can find materials they could use for their ministry. And then together, we were invited.
As was mentioned, to help start the school. Back then it was called Youth Specialties School. There was one in Guatemala and one in Argentina. And we were the spiritual directors at the campus in Argentina. Now that ministry is called E625.com. Yeah. And for the last number of years, we have actually been nomads with no permanent home, just traveling to do training and where to the invitations that God opens up to us. It has been a great delight over the past few years to get to know the Nazarenes, first in Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Panama last year. The last place we traveled before COVID was actually Panama with a beautiful group of leaders. I don't know if any of them are here from Panama or that we met in Panama, but I know some are here that we met in Mexico, including like Clovis who came to Mexico. So it is just a treat to be here with you all today. And as Tim said, this topic is so important to us because it's what has formed our lives.
And we would not be here if it wasn't for all the mentors in our life. I liked what you said in your prayer, quoting someone that our life and relationship with God is about the mixing of knowledge and piety. And knowledge we can learn online, we can learn from others, but piety we have to see. We have to read about the story of other people's lives. We have to see it lived out. And I think that mentoring is an absolutely wonderful source of both knowledge and piety. So that's what we're going to be looking at again today. Yes, and so Gerson, if we could start the PowerPoint, but one thing, yeah.
So the topic for today, as you see on your manuals, and we want to give just a big thumbs up thank you to the entire team who has worked so hard doing all of the translation and preparing all of the materials. It really is a gift, and we hope that these materials are useful to you. But as we look at the relational mentorship strategies, we're going to be focusing on what Jesus did in his ministry. And then we have a little picture of us, and there is the website. If you don't happen to know paralideres.org, it is collaborative. So if you have something to upload, please do that.
But it's all in Spanish. I wish we could say we had it in French and English, but it's all in Spanish. There's about 8,000 unique materials there, and we publish new things almost every day.
And so as we move, the first thing that we want to do as we move into the topic today is to look at our goals. So in your manual, I have mine on this side. So our first session is going to be what we call the mentoring pathway. And the mentoring pathway, when people want to mentor other people towards ministry leadership, often mentors don't advance in the process because they're not sure about the clear steps that they need to take next. So as when we were invited to be with you today, excuse me, we spent time looking through all of the content that you had received up until now, trying to meet needs and not repeat what's already been said. And what we noticed is you all have gotten, excuse me, a lot of great content. So we want to spend some time focusing on exact step by step where you are on the mentoring pathway.
Okay. Thank you everyone for helping us. This is our first time working in so many languages. Bonjour, buenos dias, good morning again.
So we apologize for those who missed because we were in the wrong channel, and we will just pick up with session 1, the mentoring pathway. And the reason that we have chosen, when people are mentoring, often they get stuck because they don't have specific steps to follow. So in the mentoring pathway, we're going to look at this flow to help you analyze where you are. So if you could turn in page 2.
In page 2 in your manual, in your participants manual. And then we're going to read the goals for session 1. I'm going to just read that, and to make it easier, we're going to have one of you, but we'll just do it. By the end of the first session, you will have celebrated what your colleagues are doing well in the process of mentoring towards leadership. So you will help us celebrate your colleagues. 2, you will have considered what Jesus did to lead others along the mentoring pathway. 3, you will have discussed the steps of the mentoring pathway. And 4, specified the next steps that you want to take to progress on the mentoring pathway. And again, that's all on page 2 of your manual.
So we want this to be interactive, and we would love it if you could write in the chat any words or phrases that stood out to you from these goals that we have for this first session about the mentoring pathway.
You can either write in the chat or I guess unmute yourself and say something. So what's a word or phrase that stood out from those 4 goals that we have today?
For the session about the mentoring pathway.
The things that you're doing well.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, to celebrate the things you're doing well.
Next steps.
Next steps.
Proceso.
Process. Celebrate. Yes, celebrar. Thank you, Gabriel. Ellie.
Impact. Steps. Progress.
Great.
Seeking God's direction. So now we're going to look at the goals for session 2. Oh,
Yeah.
And thank you all for participating.
It makes us feel that you're there. Okay.
So session 2, we've seen that in mentoring relationships, particularly when the person who is the mentor is the one who has initiated the relationship. One of the most difficult things is managing our expectations for the other person in the mentoring relationship. So if you look further down on page 2, you see our goals for session 2.
I'm going to read those goals. By the end of the second session, you will have discussed a case study of the successful mentoring of a 20-something ministry leader, of a ministry leader in their 20s. You will have discussed lessons learned from what Jesus did in his relationship with 5 individuals and the results that Jesus saw. You will also have considered the dangers we will avoid if we follow Jesus's example. And number 4, you will have applied the lessons learned to your mentoring relationships.
And if you look there at the bottom of page 2, you'll see that there's a note. If you have questions throughout the session, please write them down. If it's a technical question, you can put it in the chat and maybe someone else can help with that. That happens frequently. Or even if you just have a question, we know that you are a supportive community, or you can write it in the chat, write it down, and then ask us later. At the end of each session, we're going to have a time for question and answers. So please write down your questions, because we want this to be interactive and based on your thoughts and your questions. So the first thing that we're going to do together, now that we've set up our goals for the day, is we're going to give you a chance to check in with each other. In your book, if you go to page 3.
Page 3 in your manual.
You will see some questions. If you have it on the PDF, you can fill it out, or if you just have it digital, you can write it on paper. But there you see the questions to answer in the check-in, and you can do this privately. We'll give you time in silence to write it down.
So you're going to have 5 minutes to write down the answers to this mentoring check-in. There's those questions are on page 3 of your manual. And you can see them there. They're, what are you doing well in terms of mentoring others towards ministry leadership? What is something you feel you should do differently? Where do you need help? And what has been encouraging throughout the process? So it's on page 3 of your participants manual. We're going to give you 5 minutes to do that in silence. If you have any questions, you can write it in the chat, and then we'll come back and get some feedback.
And break into small groups.
Yes. So just take 5 minutes. Put my timer on. Again, if someone's just coming on page 3 of your manual, there is something called the mentoring check-in, and there's 4 questions. Go ahead and take a few minutes to answer that. Well, we got a message saying that you are ready. So the Nazarenes are just that much faster. So what we're going to do now is break into small groups according to your language, and we want each person to share just one thing that you have done well in mentoring someone towards leadership in the past month. If for some reason you haven't in the last month, the last 2 months, half year, or since the beginning of this Impact Mentorship program. So again, first thing, share one thing that you've done well in mentoring someone towards leadership in the past month. Also important to tell your name, where you're from, if everyone doesn't already know that. Now,
And on page 3, you have the what you should do in the small groups. And there's a little note there that says, this might feel uncomfortable to say, this is what I've done well. But I know some of you are trained in coaching, and recognizing action, positive action steps is very important. And so you can say, God has done this if you don't want to say, I've done this. But it's very important to be able to look at what we've done and tell people around us what God has done through us. And so even if this feels uncomfortable, we want you to push through it. This is a little bit of accountability. So we're going to give you 10 minutes in small groups.
so you'll need to be, each person, make sure that you let the others talk. So answer the questions is, briefly.
So we're ready, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes.
Welcome back. I see that people are appearing. We'll wait just a few seconds more as everyone is returning. I need to choose the, thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I loved meeting people I had never met before from Guyana, from Dominica, from Jamaica, and other places.
We just want to remind you, it's showing up on the chat. We forgot to choose our language. So make sure as you return, you choose your language again.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you. Move this over here. Well, give us 10 seconds to get everything arranged and everyone to choose their language again. And make sure also to mute yourself.
Ok, je suis en français.
All right. So,
Ok,
thank you.
donc,
Thank you, French translator.
Merci.
Appreciate that. We can hear you. So, you had the privilege of hearing what God is doing.
vous avez eu le privilège d'entendre ce que Dieu.
Okay, since I don't hear someone hammering in the background, I'm going to assume that we're working here. So, as I mentioned before, you had the privilege of hearing from your brothers and sisters how they have responded to the invitation to mentor others towards leadership, and hearing some of what God's doing through them. So this is the part where we're going to get to recognize others as what, and celebrate what they've done well. So I'd like to hear from 3 or 4 people, something that someone in your group, not you, but someone else in your small group shared that they have done well. What was it they have done well?
For example, in our group, 2 people said what they have done very well is listening.
Listening. So you can either write it or unmute it. Someone said,
So what
Hola,
did
hola.
someone?
Soy Johnny Bernal, México. Saludos.
Johnny Bernal from Mexico. Greetings. In my group, we did a summary. So can I share that? Is that okay?
Hicimos un resumen con algunas
We did a
palabras.
summary with a few words that we all were able to speak. Almost all of us were able to speak. And the good things that we did, we accompanied others, we led others. So accompaniment, because they're taking time with other new leaders. We are leading others, and we encourage them, training. There's dialogue, more intentional dialogue. There's closeness, better relationships, friendship, trust, intentionality, and influence. That's like the summary of all we said.
thank you, Johnny. I appreciate that. I also see that, can you hear me? Yes. I also
And
see,
well, I think you had surgery. Good to see you.
good to see you, Johnny. I also see that someone wrote in the chat that in our group, we exemplified Christ. we modeled, I'm translating from Spanish, modeled a good example and mentioned, yeah, there we go. Anyone else?
Buenos días, Tim y Annette. Es un gusto saludarles.
Good
Privilegio.
morning, Tim and Annette. Is it a privilege to greet you? In summary, our team, something that I love is that they are able to listen, they are praying, they are accompanying others. What they said is that they are accompanying others, they're listening, others praying. And even though they have people who still the mentoring concept does not fit in very well, they are starting to accept that, and they are very happy to work with people. Once again, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Did I see Byron that you had wanted to share something, and that'll be the last person? Something that someone in your group did well.
Dios les bendiga.
May God bless you. Some people talk about listening, pay attention to others. The other was to deepen into relationships, not only to talk, but more to inquire more about their personal life, to be opportune. They have a group of 3 people where they send messages every day. The testimony they share is that one day a person in that group was about to take their own life, and this message came, and it was a blessing for her, and she had the opportunity to see this sister and share with her, and her face was one of joy. There was another one that impacted me, is to be a part of Christ's work, not only to equip ourselves, but also to be a part of equipping others.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so many people mentioned listening better, and we all know that's key. The person who had the greatest mentoring impact in my life as a youth pastor was a man named Vernon, and he had a way of listening with his entire attention that even though he was a very busy man at a large pastor at a large church of over 10,000, when you spoke with him, it was like there was no one else. He was listening to you, giving you his attention. And that makes a huge difference because it lets you know that this person cares. So it's a great thing to continue to build our ability to listen well. And that's hard for me because I'm a talker, but it's a great thing to learn.
Well, thank you all so much. We hope that it was pleasant to be in a group, to see people and have a little personal time to talk. And we later in the morning, we're going to have another long breakout session where hopefully it's not the same as being around a table together, but at least it's not all of us in one room together. So we want to provide space for that and hope that you take advantage of it by sharing what's going on in your life. What we're going to do now is transition into the mentoring pathway. So the first thing is I want to mention a lot of what we're teaching today is from, some of you may know this book, Raíces. It's unfortunately only in Spanish. English has so many materials. I'm sure you have other things that you can use. But in Raíces, there's a quote in your manual from the book Raíces that I'm going to read. It's on page 4 in your manual. There is a vast difference between delegating responsibility and forming leaders. As we mentor people towards ministry leadership, we must remember that just because we have given someone a role or a responsibility, that doesn't mean that they have the capacity, either in terms of personal maturity or the skills to carry out that responsibility well. For example, to make someone the leader of a small group doesn't mean that they have the capacity to lead that group in a way that is healthy or helpful to the participants. our churches don't need positions filled. We need people who reflect the image of Christ and have the practical capacity to lead well. So I'd love to see if a few of you could write in the chat, what does that paragraph make you think? Maybe look at it again.
I'm trying.
Maybe look at it again in your manual and write in the chat what that paragraph makes you think. Someone said amen. I don't know if that was written there before, but that's good. What does that paragraph from the book Raíces make you think?
So write it in the chat. Knowledge and vital piety coming together, practicing spiritual disciplines.
This has been a common practice in our local churches. I don't know which. I'm hoping that the common practice is forming people as you give them authority.
Someone else said, change the way that we choose our leaders. Delegation is not relationship. A great responsibility, focus, challenge and work, commitment. We often just give people responsibility without helping them. We need to come alongside the person and not just delegate, change our way of leading. They should be called by God. There are so many great ideas. Keep writing them. I can't read them all. I'll read a few more. We should not seek
Hopefully the chat will be saved. I'm sorry.
We should not seek to slot people into position, but let God do that.
Delegate and accompany at the same time. Well,
There's a lot. Make sure you look at the chat. Great ideas. We could just take the chat, put it into a book, publish it, and all become wonderful, better mentors.
Well, that for me, that section from the book of Raíces, and our friend Felix Ortiz is the one who wrote that. I maybe adapted a little for this context. And Felix will be with you all in a few months, I believe. I think that just says the importance of mentoring, that it's not just delegating a responsibility, but it's actually accompanying a process. And so we've chosen to look at what Jesus did in his ministry as he developed people towards leadership. And we call this the mentoring pathway. And you'll see on page 5 of your manuals that you need to fill in the titles in the mentoring pathway. Now, as we were preparing and thinking about the people who are going to be with us today, you all, from what we understand, are going to be teaching this. And so you are going to have the fun of filling in from your vast knowledge the text of where you see Jesus doing these things. We're not going to take our time together to fill in all of those. One of your action steps when this is done, before you teach it again, is to think of where the examples are of us seeing this in Jesus' ministry. But we know that you are the kind of leader who, when we talk about it, you know where Jesus did that. And so we're going to sort of skip through that part. And that's one of your action steps before you teach this, to be able to give the exact example of where and how Jesus did this. So that's a little side note for you all as future facilitators. So we're going to start our mentoring pathway.
The first step along the mentoring pathway is to be a model yourself of what you seek. So we can see this clearly in our model, Jesus, that he says, I only do what the Father tells me to do. I only say what the Father gives me to say. So he is modeling the Father, and we are to live and think like him. So he not only sent us his word through the Old Testament prophets and those great stories, he came down into our neighborhood, incarnate like us, to model what he wanted to see in us, and did that to death, but also in life. So we've got someone that needs to, there we go. You are, if you are a disciple of Jesus Christ, then you will see people becoming more disciples of Jesus Christ. We tend to duplicate our strength and often our weaknesses. So we need to be aware of that. And whatever it is that you do in your leadership role, that is often your skills, your abilities. Those are the things that we need to consider, in that our strengths and our weaknesses, the roles and responsibilities we have, is what we're going to end up duplicating more in others. Did you want to add anything?
So throughout this mentoring pathway section, we're going to have some photographs from a program that we have been involved with called the School for Youth Ministry Trainers.
It was not for youth leaders, but it was for people that a denomination or a church planting movement might send their trainer, the person that they say she or he will have the responsibility of training our youth leaders in our region or country. So this is what the school was. It was an 18-month school.
And this picture is one of the students that participated with us, who came from a country where it's illegal to be an evangelist. And so when you reproduce it, you will not have her picture on your screen. You'll have pictures from races. But when we say be a model of what you seek, we were very aware as we went into the school that everything that we did was people were going to be watching us, and they were going to be reproducing what we did.
So it wasn't enough just to have a school where you have classes. We actually came together 2 weeks at the beginning. We had met them online beforehand, 2 weeks with a group of about 15 people. And we lived together during that time. We ate all of our meals together. We did ministry together in the country in which we all met, which was India at that point. She's not from India. And we knew that they would learn as much from what we did as from what we said and taught. So we spent lots of time listening, enjoying each other, laughing and crying together.
So the second step in the mentoring pathway is have contact with a wide variety of people. We see that Jesus was in small towns. He was in large cities. He was walking along the road. He was fishing in fishing boats. He spent time with intellectuals. He spent time with ordinary people.
Children.
He spent time with children, with men, with women, with Samaritans, with Jews.
Tax collectors and radicals.
And as what we find is, when we're thinking about mentoring, it's easy to stay within the small group of people that we maybe have contact with. But Jesus encourages us to have contact with a wide variety of people. So the picture that you see is us at a large training. Well, not as
large as we're having right now,
but it was quite a few people from a number of different countries. So before we created the School of Youth Ministry Trainers in Northern India, we brought together leaders from different countries, different denominations, different kinds of ministries. And we also worked with young people. We worked with people working with young people.
Pastors, youth ministers.
We spread the net as wide as we could, even though the program was only going to have 15 people in it. So it's very important to have contact with a wide variety of people to let God bring in touch to you those people he wants you to mentor.
Exactly as Mario says, be a model of what you are looking for in them. Okay, and now the third step, I got behind in our notes. The third step in the mentoring pathway is pray. Pray. And we see Jesus in his continual communion with the Father. before he appointed the 12 disciples, he spent an entire night in prayer. And we recommend the same thing, whether it's all night in prayer or whether it's moments over a week or month. Pray for these specific things. One, pray for discernment about whom to select and for confirmation in their hearts. It's not a one-way relationship, as you know. So discernment about who to select, who to invest your time in. And as Paul says, invest in those who will invest in others, and that there would be confirmation in their hearts.
So the fourth step in this pathway is to select and invite a few people. So scripture gives us some good qualifications for who to invite, who to invest in, as Tim mentioned in 2 Timothy 2:2. I'm sure you have it in mind, to entrust what you have received to reliable people. And in 1 Timothy, some descriptions of the kinds of people that are good to invest in. And we've seen over the years what some poor qualifications are. Friendship is not a good qualification necessarily for investing in someone towards leadership in ministry. Just because we enjoy someone, just because we like someone, that doesn't mean that God is calling them to leadership ministry. Another thing that is a poor qualification is a request from someone else because they desire something for someone. That may sound confusing, but for example, a parent who says, "Would you please mentor my child?" Well, the child didn't ask for that. Or a relative, or even a church leader. When someone, a third party, wants something from you for someone else, that's something that may or may not align with what God has. So
let me just jump in real quick. Hilda, they're saying they cannot hear your Spanish interpretation very well. They said it's
no, they had my mic off, so but they have turned it on right now.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, we just didn't want to miss that.
No, that's okay.
Okay, Annette, I apologize.
So what you see in this picture is the group of people that were selected. They maybe don't look like the ones you would select, but selected for the School of Youth Ministry Trainers. And we are still in touch with them to this day. And we see the ones who are the strongest are not the ones who we were asked to include because of a parent or a friend. So this picture is all for us. It's a sign of the importance of listening to God and making good choices and not bowing to what other people ask you to do.
So let's look at the fifth step that we've mentioned, the mentoring pathway. Give me a second. We'll go back. We'll go back. There we go. The fifth step is make their personal and their ministerial development a top priority for your ministry. And we know that this is challenging. You have many things going on in ministry, especially like people we talk to from in our small group who are working full-time job as well as being a pastor or church leader. And part of your ministry is mentoring someone towards leadership, impact mentoring. But the goal is not just to relieve your stress or relieve your responsibility. It really is making their personal and ministerial development a top priority. And that requires time. So don't overdo it. You can't mentor tons of people well. So let them get to know you. And that requires you learning to ask forgiveness when you fail, when you can't always be there, because we can't. We are not Jesus to them. Jesus is Jesus. But let them get to know you personally and intentionally get to know them. not just so that they can get something accomplished, but because they're important. God knows us, God loves us. Jesus focused on his disciples, and together for ministry. Also, invest time in that relationship. Be accessible, whether that be on your phone or in person, and spend time with them. Pray for them. Wow, I'm getting overwhelmed just reading all the things we're saying you need to do. So this, you can see why Jesus did not focus on the 120 or the 72 as much. He had the 12, but he focused in on a few of them. Also, be an honest and coherent model to guide for them. So what we mean by that is we all have weaknesses and strengths. Admit your weaknesses, but let them see that, because it's encouraging to know that the people, that they don't have to be perfect, but that they can be working in those areas. One of the greatest things that I saw was in my original mentor, my father and my mother. Was my father, who was a associate pastor at a church, coming to me, actually called me out of school in primary school, and asked me forgiveness for something he had done. And it was just, he got angry at me. He didn't hit me. He just got angry at me. And he came and apologized and said, I was mad at someone else and I took it out on you. And he asked for my forgiveness at 9 years old. And I remember that. I saw his weakness, but I also saw what it means to ask forgiveness and to wait and then receive the forgiveness, even from someone who was just a child at that point. Also, to accompany them spiritually, and to create a small group of developing leaders and meet with them regularly for a specified period of time. For example, once a week or once a year. So you don't necessarily have to be mentoring many people, but help them not just see you as a reference or you as a mentor, but connect them with others that they can learn from and grow through.
And that list of things that Tim just went through is in your manual later on. So if you didn't get all of the notes, it's in there for you later.
And thank you to all the translators, interpreters who are helping us. I'm sure you're getting tired by now.
So the sixth step is to delegate responsibility gradually and progressively. Some of the important things here are clear instructions. When we met with the group of youth ministry trainers, we had a big notebook with everything written out as clearly as we could. As a matter of fact, preparing the facilitators manuals for influencers and for this impact mentoring, I think we've been able to do more naturally because we had to create facilitator manuals for the School of Youth Ministry trainer. So it was very clear what we expected them to do. Also make sure that they have everything that they need to carry out their responsibility, and lovingly keep them accountable through coaching, through feedback. So you see in this picture, our friend teaching. First, in the School of Youth Ministry, people would teach just internally to our group.
Well, first, actually, we taught modeling it to them, so they experienced it as if they were one of the youth leaders participants,
like you're doing today with this session.
And in the afternoons, then they would have an opportunity to teach the same content to some of the people that were there.
So in one day, they would experience it as a participant and then teach it. And then they taught the module to other people themselves. And the third step was, and that's the picture that you see here.
I'm there in the background.
Back in their home context, they taught the modules.
What you can't see here is outside that brown door was someone guarding in case the secret police came. There were only about 5 or 6 youth leaders in here, but I'm going to use her not real name, Leah, is teaching there, about 6 or 7. She is teaching. She'd been preparing and training others, and now we are coming, sitting, learning from her, and she did a great job.
So delegate responsibility gradually and progressively.
And then the seventh step,
I'm sorry.
it's okay. The seventh step is to recruit new people to mentor. Pray again, Lord, who else might I mentor? When you have gotten to a point where you no longer need to be investing the same intensity or amount of time into this person, be praying, God, who can I mentor next? Who can I invest in next? Or support those people that you've already mentored as they begin to mentor and disciple others. So we mentioned that on Monday nights, we've meeting with people that we have mentored over the last 25 years. And so we're kind of supporting them, and they're all mentoring other people. Some of them are mentoring young youth leaders. Some of them are pastors. Some of them are mentoring their own children.
So we have gone through the steps of the mentoring pathway. I will read them again in case you missed being able to fill them out. Number 1, be a model of what you seek. 2, have contact with a wide variety of people. Pray.
Number 3.
Select and invite a few people.
Number 4.
Or in your case, I think 5 people. Make their personal and ministerial development a top priority for your ministry.
That was number 5.
Delegate responsibility gradually and progressively.
Number 6. And number 7.
Recruit new people to mentor or support people you have mentored as they mentor others, so there is multiplication. What we're going to ask you to do now is to look at that mentoring pathway on page 6 in your manual and write your name, where you are, what step you are in, where it best represents where you are in that mentoring pathway. Now, it may be, so the first thing is where you are as a mentor, and it may be different with different people. So you may say that that with one person, I have already invited them, but with another person, I am already passing on responsibility. So take some time and write down where you feel you are on the mentoring pathway and where you are specifically with other people. So go ahead and take a couple minutes to personalize the mentoring pathway.
On page 7, right?
No, page 6 right now, on page 6 in the manual. The questions are on page 6 and the pathways on page 5. And as you are finishing that, hopefully what comes to your mind are your next steps. Hopefully, as you look at this pathway, it helps you see what you're doing well and where you need to move forward. So question number three is specify your next steps that you need to take to advance along the mentoring pathway.
Is that page 7?
It's question number 3 on page 6. It's great to see people writing. Thank you for taking this seriously. This is for you. And hopefully you're able to come up with at least 2 action steps. And so we provided the format there where you can say what you will do specifically, with or for whom, by when, and for what purpose.
For example, Scott Armstrong wrote, I feel like I'm at number 5 with a lot of my mentees, the people I'm mentoring, but I need to be more intentional and move towards number 6 and number 7.
So towards delegating responsibility gradually and progressively. So then it would be to write an action step. What specifically will you do to do that?
And Gabriel Yip, I see you have a hand up if you want to write in the chat.
And if you're moving through the action steps, you can move to page 7 in the manual, where you're going to evaluate how well you are doing on the specifics of their personal and ministerial development. So we have a little bar graph where you can, from 0 to full, are you developing a personal, authentic relationship with them? And it may be different with different people. So someone's asking for clarification about point 2. Is that having contact with a wide variety of people?
Yes.
So frequently we have, for example, if someone is a professor in the seminary, they may primarily have contact with other professors and with other students. But what we see in Jesus' model is that he really had contact with a wide variety of people. And so we're encouraging you to throw your net broader than your current circle of people that are around you, that maybe God has someone for you to mentor who is outside of your normal sphere of relationships.
Yeah. And we see some of the other questions. Just for time, since not everyone has the same questions, we will please ask those questions in the last half hour when we have time for questions and answer. We don't want to, we're not ignoring you. We just have a time for that at the end.
So to get a sense from the people that I can see, if you have your head down working, then I think that you're still working. A number of people, I see them looking up. So we are going to move on. Hopefully that this setting action steps, like thinking through the steps, and then really thinking how you are developing the personally and ministerially, the people that you're mentoring. Hopefully this is something that you can come back to and that you can continue to use throughout this whole mentoring impact process.
So what they're asking about in point 2 is ejercicio, exercise 2, where you write the names of the people.
Oh, so the idea is that on that, that you could write the name of, I think you have 5 people that you're mentoring, and you write beside the step that you are in with them, like maybe you've already invited all of them, and just see where you are in relation to each one of your mentees along that pathway.
Okay, what I'm going to ask you to do now is if just write down one question or one thing that you want to remember from this session, not in the chat necessarily, just a note in your manual one thing that you want to take away from this first session. We do this just because if it's something you want to remember, you're like, oh, that was good, or that comment from someone in my small group, or that point I don't want to forget. If you don't want to forget it, it helps to actually write it down. So write down one thing you want to remember from this session. First hour and a half we've been together. Give it 20 seconds to do that. Just the thing that stands out to you.
So you all have been sitting and focused for an hour and a half now. And so we are going to give you a break. We're going to be here. We see the questions and comments coming in the chat. So we're going to be here, and anyone else is welcome to stay. But I don't know how you do the breaks on this. But we will begin again at
in 15 minutes.
In 15 minutes. So at
let's say 10 till.